So the topic today is planning for aging, and this is a broad topic. It incorporates a lot of things. So we'll be going through a lot of information today, and hopefully this is helpful to you. But the key here is you need to have a plan. A variety of things can happen as we get older. I'm almost retirement age myself, so I understand that getting old is not for wimps. So I'm having my own health struggles, etc. So what makes me qualified to give this presentation, I guess, is the first thing I will address. I am a financial planning specialist for Busey Wealth, so I do financial plans all the time. I do have an MBA. I'm a certified financial planner. I'm retirement income certified professional, and I also have an elder planning specialist certificate. So I also have a fair amount of experience dealing with long-term care issues and aging, not only with myself, but my parents recently went through a significant stay in long-term care facility, both of them at the time. So that was challenging. I've seen it also happen with my in-laws, and I have a neighbor that's going through this now as well. So hopefully that gives you a little background. I've been in financial planning for about 6 years now. Prior to that, I was in pharmaceutical sales and management. So I've done that. I did that for a long time. So first of all, we always have to present the disclaimer. This is for educational purposes where we are not providing financial, tax, or legal advice in this presentation. Particularly tax laws are very complex and change all the time. So anything tax related is just based on current interpretations of IRS regulations. Consultant, advisor, or professional agent for legal or tax advice. We're not recommending or selling anything. So again, I'll get in with the presentation. So I'm going to talk about several things that I think are important as we approach aging and things we need to do to be prepared. So I'm going to give you a little background, kind of an aging 101 with some statistics up front. And then we're going to talk about 6 topics today. 1, safety while you're aging. This is a key issue and can encompass a lot of things. We'll talk about medical care and all that goes along with that. We'll talk about cognitive decline and the impact and how we can prepare for that potential situation. We'll talk about planning for long-term care needs. So what I'm talking about here is long-term care assistance in the home, long-term care in a independent living, assisted living, or nursing home situation. We'll talk about a few estate planning issues that are important and also about protection from fraud for the elderly. So getting into it, aging 101, the aging process is a bumpy process. A lot of it is related to medical issues, but it's also related to your identity, socialization, etc. as you age. So it's important that when you retire, some of your identity to keep you going, whether it's volunteer.
Hey Dave, real quick, I'm gonna stop you real quick. You're kind of cutting in and out a little bit on your microphone there.
Why or what I can do to make it better. So I'm on Busey's system. So how bad is it?
It's clear now. So
Okay. The other things I'll point about aging is caregiving hopefully brings families together, but not always. So particularly if the family comes together to provide care for an aging relative in crisis due to a lack of planning, it's very stressful for everybody. Most adult kids get thrust into the role of caregiving without ever having a discussion about it, or what happens and when and what should I do, until they're forced into it via crisis. So in a crisis situation with no preparation, families do not feel prepared or confident in the decisions they're making. So again, a plan is important. So there are three important dimensions in old age. Financial is certainly one, health is a key one, and then social engagement, because it's been shown that people that maintain social engagement and relationships tend to do better in retirement and tend to live longer. Big variation in situations by age and health varies. Some people live healthy until their 90s. Some people have, near constant health issues. So how much help people need in retirement and as they age varies greatly. Cognitive decline changes everything because the individual planning can certainly help, but there's also legal issues involved, and we'll talk about those as well. Care needs change when limitations emerge. Who helps first? Usually it's a spouse if they're a married couple, then children. Help extends to many areas of care, not just health care, but financial help, potentially, administrative care, paying bills, all those kinds of things tend to come into play. And it's a bigger challenge for those that don't have family that can participate, particularly if nobody lives nearby. Becomes an even bigger challenge. So, and then long-term care is a major risk facing retirees, but most people don't really have a plan, and hopefully that's not the case for you. But if you don't have one, it is very important that you talk to your family, have plans for what happens if you experience cognitive impairment, or significant declines in your health and ability to make decisions for yourself. So the more limitations and the more support is needed. So family is often a key part, particularly early. It's a bigger challenge for people that are aging alone. So if you're a widow or widower, that makes it more challenging, or single. There's a lot of different kinds of support that are potentially needed: household services, transportation, personal care, help making decisions, which requires often a power of attorney for health care, power of attorney for financial situations, and help just managing healthcare, because healthcare is very complex all by itself. You really need an advocate, somebody to listen, not only to what your concerns are, but to listen to physicians and other caregivers, keep track of medications, medical history, doctor visits, and many elderly people also require help with technology. Certainly was the case with my parents. So we'll talk about these major domains of aging and planning for aging. The first one, and really arguably the most important, is safety. Accidents and falls as we age can have devastating consequences. Falls particularly can often result in brain bleeds, broken bones. My father experienced both of those things. So you want to be careful in your own home. Identify trip hazards, throw rugs, extension cords are all important to avoid, or make sure that they're set up in ways that do not represent a trip hazard. Stairs are a challenge for many elderly. Are ramps needed? Are gates needed? Handrails, stair lifts. It's very important that the elderly person has access to emergency phone numbers. They should be near their phone or programmed into their cell phone. Fire and carbon monoxide detectors are very important, particularly in bedrooms and the kitchen. Firearms, this is a unique one, but it is important. My father had a concealed carry permit and often had a pistol in his pocket much of the time. And there was a time at which that was no longer a good idea as he began to suffer from dementia. So when he went into an assisted living, that's when we took that away because they wouldn't allow it there. So any needed repairs in the house, clutter, mail, trash piling up are also indicators that additional help may be needed with just processing mail, paying bills, keeping the house clean, etc. Prescription drug management is often very challenging as we age. You know, do you have a system? Do you use pill boxes to keep track of when you take things? Is everything clearly labeled? Is your vision and dexterity and cognitive ability sufficient to be able to self-manage medications? When I was evaluating this for my parents, I would go over to their house and they'd have all the pill boxes and they'd be loaded up and it looked like they were doing okay, but there were also loose pills all over on the floor and the table. There was a big tray of medicine bottles and it became apparent at one point that there were some challenges going on there. A lot of pills look the same. So once they get out of the bottle, it's hard to tell what they are. So this creates a lot of challenges. So people may need help with that. There's a variety of ways to do it. Whether it's prepackaged unit dose that's all labeled, so then you can see is the pill gone or is it not gone? Then you know whether you took it or didn't take it when you were supposed to. So a lot of pharmacies can provide that service. Grab bars and anti-slip mats are very important. Getting on and off toilets are often a situation that can result in falls, so we want to make sure that things are there to help them keep from falling when they're getting on and off the toilet or in the shower. Night lights so that they can see when they're getting around at night. Even watching the refrigerator, making sure that people have an adequate food supply, they're keeping track of what's still good, what's spoiled, getting rid of what's spoiled. All these things tend to deteriorate, particularly if there are cognitive impairment issues going on. And just secure locks on exterior doors, I think that kind of goes without saying. So those are many of the things, and I'm sure there's many that I have left off that list, but those are some of the important ones to keep in mind as we age and things that you might want to look at in your medical care and emergencies. This is probably the next most important thing, and this is a safety issue really as well. Health provider phone numbers, we already talked about a little bit. Are they readily available? Does the senior understand where they are and can they operate their phone? Can they dial a 10-digit number? Or do they need to have numbers pre-programmed into their cell phone so that they only have to hit one button to call 911 or to call, a local family member? Phone numbers need to be available, but there's a lot of other information that needs to be available when these kind of emergencies happen. We recommend a grab and go binder to keep track of all this emergency information in one place. My understanding is that you've had a presentation on what a grab and go binder is and what kind of things need to be included. So I have a list of them here. And there's probably others as well, but certainly phone numbers and contact information, not only for doctors, but other medical specialists, insurance providers, long-term care facility, and various advisors, as well as family members and caregivers. So medical powers of attorney, advanced directives, we'll talk a little bit more about later. Up-to-date medication list with dosages and frequency, preferred hospital if they need hospitalization, and there are choices in your area. In Bloomington, you've still got a couple choices. Champaign, we still have about 1.5 choices for hospitals. Long-term care policies, which we'll talk about a little more later. Copies of insurance cards, driver's licenses, all these things can be important. Other things to keep in mind when we're talking about about medical care, one of the key issues that often comes up, particularly once people are no longer able to drive themselves, is transportation. Who takes you to the doctor and other appointments if you're unable to drive? Is your spouse still able to drive? Do you have to call a relative or friend? If you're in a facility, can they provide transportation? A lot of times these take some planning and forethought. The facility my parents were in provided transportation to medical appointments, but only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So sometimes that was helpful, sometimes it wasn't. Do you need help understanding or remembering what the doctor says? So, is it useful to have a child, family member, caregiver go with you to those appointments, or spouse? Just to remember, help ask questions. Again, this is even more important if there's cognitive impairment. Do you need help with medication management? So we've talked about some of these issues as well. There are people that you can hire just to deal with medication management, and many facilities can provide assistance with medication management as well. Do you need help in the home for a variety of reasons? Wound care, nursing services, physical therapy, occupational therapy, just general cleaning, cooking, those kinds of things. That requires planning and selection of caregivers, financial resources, etc. And the other thing to think of, is there a way of remotely monitoring health? So my in-laws had an Alexa device, and it was very useful because it was on my and my wife's account, so we could drop in and listen, talk to my mother and father-in-law, how are you doing? Video monitoring is helpful. Devices to monitor video in the senior's home is relatively inexpensive, easy to use. You can get it on your phone. We had this when my father went into assisted living facility, partially to monitor care as well. So, and issues that happened in the nursing home. So, particularly for situations such as people in his room that were not supposed to be there, other residents, etc. There are issues, particularly again if there's cognitive impairment, either with your family member or with other residents. So daily phone calls, medical alert devices are also very important, particularly if you're still living in your own home, to detect falls and to be able to contact emergency services if they're not near a phone or can't get to a phone because of a fall or other situation. just managing services and medical care as far as insurance is also challenging. Medicare, each individual has to choose a Medicare plan. We're coming up on Medicare open enrollment here shortly for this year, or for next year, actually. You need to look at individual plans and evaluate your individual needs and medications, not just select the plan that has the lowest premium. For example, patients who take relatively expensive medications, if they're not covered under the plan you choose, whether it's a Medicare Advantage plan or an RX prescription drug plan or Part D plan, they're going to cost you quite a bit out of pocket, particularly if you've chose the least expensive plan. Some plans offer more expensive options, many plans actually, but they will result in lower copays for higher tier or more costly medications. So you may actually save money in the long run if you have some of these more expensive medications by choosing a plan that has a higher premium but lower copays. Seniors also have the option of Medicare Advantage plans versus traditional Medicare with a supplement and a prescription drug plan. Medicare Advantage plans are highly advertised. My personal opinion is that they're marketed and used to the advantage of the insurance company, not necessarily to the person receiving care. They tend to have lower premiums than a Medicare supplement with a prescription drug plan, but they also tend to have more restrictions on care, more copays, more coinsurance, etc. And because Medicare Advantage plans are for-profit plans generally, they do have the profit motive, and restricting and denying and charging higher copays for various procedures and medications is one of the reasons, one of the ways that they increase their profits. So really evaluate that. If you're low utilizer of care, Medicare Advantage can be a less expensive way to go, particularly if you're not on any expensive medications. But if you have significant healthcare needs, you may be better served by traditional Medicare with a supplement. I could do a whole seminar just based on that choice alone. So if you have questions, please feel free to submit those. I'll try and answer them. Medicaid is available and important to people who have already depleted most or all of their assets. Hopefully that's not the case for you, but does come with some significant limitations as well. Medicare does not cover long-term care needs other than rehab after a 3-day or more hospitalization, and then only for a limited period of time. Medicaid will cover long-term care costs once you've depleted your other assets, but your choice of facility may be limited because most of the nicer facilities have few, if any, Medicare beds available. The other thing to consider with medical care is, do you have advanced directives in place that communicate your desires for end-of-life care? So living will, do not resuscitate orders, POAs for healthcare, variety of different ways to do that. There's also a form called the Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, also known as a POLST form, which is a comprehensive set of medical orders for seriously ill or frail individuals that can include a do not resuscitate, but also specifies other treatments that you may or may not want at the end of your life, including hospitalization, being placed on a ventilator, artificial nutrition or total parenteral nutrition, nasogastric tube, and any of a variety of other things. Surgery, for example, you may not want that late in life. So a POLST is a legal document that's signed by you and your physician, and there is a standard form that is used in Illinois. So let's talk now about cognitive decline and dementia. So unfortunately, this is fairly common as we age. Not everybody has cognitive decline or dementia. My mother was very sharp, even though she had Parkinson's up until her death. So it's not universal, but it's not uncommon. Can be a very long-lasting disease, and dementia in and of itself, in most forms, does not significantly reduce life expectancy. So it can be a long-lasting issue. And patients often remain physically healthy until the end. But if cognitive decline and dementia is occurring, you certainly want to update POAs. If you're the POA for your spouse and you have cognitive impairment or dementia, that's probably not going to be very helpful to your spouse, for example. So those are things to keep in mind. If you don't have end-of-life directives in place, you want to get that done while you're still cognitively competent to do so. Dementia can be a very expensive disease because it often requires care in a nursing home, and often specifically in what's the term? I can't think of the term right now, but anyway, a facility that specializes in patients with dementia and cognitive decline. So many types of dementing illnesses, so Lewy bodies, Alzheimer's, Huntington's, frontal temporal lobe, vascular, etc. But dementia and cognitive decline is often associated with denial. The person that has cognitive decline oftentimes does not recognize that they have cognitive decline. So it's important that somebody recognizes if there are issues here. Spouses often cover for the person with dementia, and the person with dementia often tries to hide their cognitive decline from even their spouse and certainly from children and others, oftentimes primarily because they don't want to be put in a facility. So, but there are signs that, facilities may be necessary. So kids get blindsided once it gets bad enough. I remember when my father got bad enough, my mother basically finally said that, my father had fallen again. I can't keep dealing with this. What are we going to do? My father was a fairly big guy, so she couldn't help him when he fell. So that was kind of our signal that, he needed some additional help. Changes in vision, balance, processing, understanding are all challenges as we age. Vision, came up earlier in the issue around medication management, but also if you can't read instructions, there's a lot of other places where these things create challenges. Hearing is another common one. Balance obviously creates fall risk. And dementia also increases wandering risks and potential for silver alerts, which is is what happens when seniors go missing and word goes out to the community to look for this person. It can be very scary. My dad did this a couple times, so it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. So let's talk about planning for long-term care needs. What are the statistics? Approximately 2/3 of seniors, some say 70%, about the same, will need some level of long-term care assistance of some duration, ranging from relatively small amounts to assistance with cooking, cleaning, up to and including full-time nursing home care. It is costly. Currently, the average cost for nursing home care in the Bloomington area is about $102,000 annually, which is significantly below the national average, which is good. That's according to Genworth Cost of Care Survey that was completed at the end of last year. As far as seniors actually requiring nursing home care, about 20%. So only about 1 in 5 actually end up in a nursing home. Average duration of stay in a nursing home is 2.3 years for men. It's a little longer for women, 3.7. So if you take that 102,000 and multiply it times, 2 to 4 years, you're talking about a significant amount of money. And if you're talking about that 30 years away, it's really going to add up, because we're also projecting that the rate of inflation for long-term care services is going to continue to grow at a rate higher than inflation. We're currently estimating about 5% annual inflation for long-term care expenses. And a lot of that's just due to increasing demand and a shortage of caregivers. And in some cases, a shortage of facilities. There's really only 3 nursing homes left in Champaign-Urbana. I think it's a little better in Bloomington-Normal. But that's also an issue. Can you actually get into a facility when you need to? And do you need to be on a waiting list if access to a facility is challenging in your area?
Hey, Dave.
So,
we had
yeah.
one question come in. I think now would be a good time to ask this. And the question was, if you're widowed or single, is long-term care not as important to have because it might be easier to self-insure since you could sell your house for the money if you needed it? And then
Yes.
on top of that, if someone's married, it could be a problem since a surviving spouse may still be living in the house. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, yes, selling your home if you're single or a widow or widower is a way to fund long-term care, and is commonly done. But if you do have a spouse that's still in the home, obviously that's becomes much more challenging. And we'll talk in a minute about paying for long-term care, which is also an important consideration. So Medicaid is always the resource of last resort for long-term care if you're in a nursing home. And if there is a surviving spouse still living in the home, there are allowances within Medicaid to allow the spouse to retain the home and a certain amount of resources and a vehicle. So, and a certain amount of income to pay for not only the care in the long-term care expense, but also to support the spouse that's still in the home. So hopefully that answers that question. And when we do financial plans, we usually don't assume sale of a home, but that's always certainly a contingency. The other option is reverse mortgages, which used to be considered kind of sketchy. They're very much controlled at this point and can be another way to utilize equity in a home to pay for long-term care expenses when somebody's still living in the home.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Dave.
Sure. So different levels of care exist based on residents' needs. So there's a lot of different options. I've kind of listed them here in ascending order of expense. So independent living is basically apartment style living with minimal assistance, some services available, for example, meals. This is like continuing care communities in your city include Westminster Village, Luther Oaks. Westminster Village is actually where my in-laws lived for quite some time in independent living. So I'm familiar with that facility. So they provide meals and cleaning, a few other things, and you can get additional services as well in that type of a facility. And then there's assisted living, which provides additional services, particularly with activities of daily living. So these are things like getting dressed, getting out of bed, bathing, eating as needed by the resident. So higher cost associated with that. Nursing home care is generally reserved for people who need 24-hour nursing care. Many assisted living facilities do not have nurses on staff 24 hours a day, so that becomes an issue if you need 24-hour nursing care or medical monitoring even. And then there are continuing care retirement communities such as the Westminster Village or Luther Oaks that I talked about, that provide continuity of care as needs change. So this provides the advantage of knowing that if you need a higher level of care, you can move within that facility to a different level of care, whether it's assisted living or nursing home care. I know Westminster Village has assisted living section as well as nursing home care section, which is I think called Martin Healthcare. So those are nice because then you don't have to worry about changing facilities if you require a higher level of care, which can be very disruptive and is challenging for people who have to do the moving. And then probably the most expensive option, although what many people desire, is 24-hour in-home care. Unfortunately, it's also generally the most expensive option, particularly if you need significant amounts of care in home. To have somebody there 24 hours a day is very costly. So importance in choosing long-term care facilities, obviously discuss with your spouse and family the type of setting you wish to age in so that they know what your preferences are. Talk to friends and neighbors about facilities in the area for recommendations, and actually visit facilities that you feel would be appropriate for your needs, so that if you do eventually need that, you have some idea of where you want to go. If you need to be on a waiting list, if there's challenges getting into those facilities, that's something you need to pay attention to and plan for. Ask questions. You really need to understand the total monthly or annual costs for the level of care you need, and what is, and more importantly, what is not included in that basic fee schedule. So are meals included? If so, how many? Is it 1 a day, 2 a day, 3 a day? If you're in a, it just depends on the facility. Transportation to appointments, is that included? Is it only certain days? Cleaning services, laundry services, bathing, are there social events and other services available? Do they have physical therapy, occupational therapy, podiatrists come into the facility, and are essential documents that guide or empower the care recipient to age in place. So all these things are important. And the next issue, of course, is paying for long-term care. So this gets at some of the question that was answered earlier. So is there long-term care insurance that's been purchased? If not, can you qualify for it at your current age and afford it? We generally recommend people purchase long-term care insurance in their 50s or very early 60s. If you wait much longer than that, the cost of the policy will be so high that it's either unaffordable or just not cost effective. So again, planning ahead is very important when it comes to long-term care insurance. What does it take to qualify for long-term care insurance? I don't have this in the presentation, but generally it's not being able to complete 2 or more of the 6 activities of daily living without assistance. So this can include things, and I can never remember the exact 6, but eating, bathing, transferring, toileting, or continence. And there's a couple others. The other thing that will always qualify you for long-term care services if you have a policy is dementia, or cognitive impairment. So those are the qualifications. If you have long-term care coverage, what is the benefit level for the care you require? Most modern policies have a set dollar per day limit, regardless of the level of care you need, but older policies may limit and pay only so much for in-home care, only so much for assisted living, and then a different amount for nursing home facility. So as an example, my parents had older policies, and they had purchased a $200 per day policy, but we found out when we went to put them in assisted living that assisted living only paid 60% of that $200 for assisted living care. So as a result, their long-term care policy only covered about half of their actual assisted living expenses. And yes, my mom ended up there shortly after my dad in the same facility. The other option for helping to pay for long-term care is permanent life insurance with a long-term care rider or a benefit access rider, or early access to the death benefit if long-term care is needed. So these are known as hybrid policies. So they provide life insurance, but they also provide access to the death benefit or perhaps even additional long-term care coverage if needed. Many people prefer these hybrid policies to traditional long-term care policies because traditional long-term care policies, if you don't end up needing long-term care, you've paid those premiums and you really get nothing in return other than peace of mind. On the other hand, with permanent life insurance policies with a long-term care rider or benefit access rider, what you get is if you need that death benefit or those long-term care benefits, you have that available. But if you don't need long-term care, the death benefit of life insurance still goes to your heirs. So that's another consideration to think about when you're choosing and planning for potential long-term care expenses. Some people have adequate annuity, pension, and social security income to pay for care out of their pocket. And if that's the case, do you really need long-term care insurance? Perhaps not. So that's not necessarily common. If you don't have income, do you have adequate liquid assets to pay for care should you need them? Or do you have family or friends that are willing and able to pay for care? Again, if none of the above apply, Medicaid is the option of last resort. Most assets need to be depleted first. Some assets can be retained for a spouse remaining in the home. But if you're trying to transfer assets to avoid them counting and required to be depleted for long-term care, again, you have to plan for that in advance because you need to do all those transfers 5 years or more prior to the need for long-term care, or otherwise those assets are clawed back and need to be expended for your coverage before Medicaid would cover long-term care expenses. And again, Medicaid beds in the nicer facilities that you probably would prefer to be in are relatively rare. So all things to keep in mind as you're thinking about, if I need long-term care, how do I pay for that? Estate planning. So there are some issues here, particularly with cognitive decline, but even just for anybody. The minimum recommendations we recommend for estate planning are that you have a will. You want to have a will because you don't want the state to decide or the courts to decide who gets your property based on intestate state law for those people who don't have a will. So if you want to decide who's going to get your assets when you pass away, you need to have a will. You also need a power of attorney for property. This is particularly important if cognitive decline becomes an issue and you can't make decisions for yourself. You need to have designated a trusted person to make financial decisions for you, whether that's selling property, paying your bills, etc. You also need a power of attorney for healthcare. Again, for similar reasons, if you can no longer make decisions for yourself, you may not even be able to communicate at some point. Who makes those decisions for you? It's also helpful if a child or a trusted individual is on your checking account and safe deposit box so that they have access to assets to pay your bills and can access important documents that may be in your safe deposit box. If your important documents are not in your safe deposit box, it's important that your heirs, or at least the executor of your estate, knows where those documents are. So fortunately, my parents were fairly organized, so that was not a huge issue, but it can be really a nightmare if you don't know what insurance policies, what accounts the elderly person has. It really becomes a nightmare to administer the estate. So, being organized is a gift that you can give to your heirs. Other potential estate planning techniques that may be important depending on the level of the value of your estate and depending on your need to provide for future generations. So AB trusts, for example, are very common trusts that are used to maximize the non-portable Illinois estate tax exemption. So Illinois exempts $4 million of your estate per person, but if the first to die of a couple just gives everything to their spouse, then they have not used their exemption. And if there's more than 4 million in the estate of the second to die, you're looking at potential for estate taxes to be assessed on that estate. And it's not just on the amount over the 4 million, it's on the total estate. So this is something you want to talk to an estate planning attorney about. While we evaluate estate plans, we do not create documents. Only lawyers can do that. So special needs trusts may be important if you have spouse or siblings that have special needs. Special needs trusts are one common way to deal with that. If you're charitably inclined, you may want to utilize charitable remainder trusts to transfer assets above the estate tax exemption to charity to avoid paying estate taxes. And there's a variety of other trust solutions and other techniques for minimizing estate taxes as well as income taxes as you age. When you're a consulting attorney for estate planning documents and estate planning, we do recommend that you use a dedicated estate planning attorney rather than just a general attorney when drafting estate plans and estate planning documents. It can be very complex, and if somebody doesn't deal with it every day, you may not get the best result. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about fraud targeting seniors. So, unfortunately, seniors are prime target for fraud as they are seen as easier marks for people that are out there committing fraud. And there are a lot of ways for criminals to commit fraud, particularly around financial issues, bank account info, logins, passwords. There's phishing attacks, which is fake emails with bogus links in an attempt to get account information, logins, and passwords. Smishing is the same thing, but with text messages. Phone calls purporting to be children or grandchildren needing urgent financial help. This one's even more challenging now with artificial intelligence because it's fairly easy for fraudsters to generate audio that really sounds like your child or grandchild. There's also title scams out there where people transfer title to real estate into someone else's name and then borrow against your equity. There's lottery scams, calls, emails, or texts where they say you have won a large prize and you need to send money to claim the prize. And unfortunately, fraud by caregivers and family members and friends is also not uncommon. I think this last statistic I saw, almost half of elder care fraud is committed by caregivers, family members. And so think about who you trust and how much you trust them. There are some things to do to protect yourself from fraud. And one is kind of the age-old advice, which if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. It's old advice, but still good advice. If you get a call, text, or email that appears to have come from a person or business that you recognize, rather than replying to that text or clicking on a link in that text, call, email, or talking to that person, it's best to first verify by contacting that person or business directly through your usual contact with that person to make sure that that is actually who's trying to communicate with.
And Dave, I'm gonna pick up on that one real quick too, because this is something we've seen going around quite a bit in the banking world, where fraudsters they'll actually spoof the phone number for the bank that they're calling from. So whenever they call you, it'll look like it is Busey or Chase or PNC Bank calling you, and then they will ask for more information to then get access to your accounts. So just making sure that, if you are getting those calls, that it's, one, the people that working for those banks. And if it's not, just hanging up and calling the people that working for those banks to protect yourself and add that additional layer of security, because that's something that has gone, pretty rampant over the last 1 to 2 years. I'd say we've seen a lot more of that happening in the banking industry.
Yeah. So I agree. Other things you can do include checking your credit reports at least annually. You get a free credit report once a year. So if you ask for more, that they're going to charge you some nominal amount, but you can get a free one from each of the 3 credit reporting bureaus once a year. The other thing we often recommend is freeze your credit report with all 3 of the credit bureaus. What this allows you to do is, if somebody were to apply for credit, if you've frozen your credit, there's no way they're going to be able to open new credit accounts in your name. And this is also a free thing to do. So if you're not planning on applying for credit for anything, it's a very easy thing to do and really prevents anybody from taking out credit in your name. It's also easy to undo if you do need to apply for credit for some reason. You can unfreeze your credit reports and then refreeze them again once your credit's been approved. So fairly easy to do and really a great way to keep people from taking credit out in your name. The other thing relating to title fraud is most counties have free online access to property tax websites which show property ownership. So you can always go on one of those sites and verify, are you still the owner of your property? Just put in the address for the property and it will pull up, the most recent tax bill. This is all public information. And it will list the owner of the property on that website. So another easy thing, free thing that's available to you to kind of monitor that particular risk. So in closing, my final take-home messages for you is planning for aging is challenging and it's potentially costly. So I urge you to think about what you want, what you can afford, and have a plan in place so that you're not making decisions in crisis mode. Your family is not having to make decisions for you in a crisis mode. They know what you want. They know what your plans are. They have access to your resources and to your desires for what you want. These are all very important. If you don't have a plan, this is very stressful on families. Make sure they have access to the next necessary documents and information. Again, the grab and go binder is very, very helpful. Involve your children and family in your planning so they know what to do when situations arise. Family meetings are very helpful as a way to sit down with your family and say, I just want to talk to you about this. A lot of times we don't want to talk about cognitive decline or dementia or potential death, but death happens to all of us eventually. So it is important that your family knows what your desires are, what your plans are, and what you have in place should some of these situations present themselves. So the key thing is that these steps also and this planning will give you peace of mind for the future. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen if these situations occur because you've planned for them. Your family knows what to do, and you've set up ways, hopefully, to cover the expenses as well. So with that, I'll turn it over for any other questions that anybody submitted or has at this point. Be glad to answer.
So it looks like we had one question just come in, and it was just if there was going to be a recording or a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, and yes, there is. So we're recording this right now. Usually it takes us about a week to get the recording back and put together. So as soon as we have that taken care of, we'll email it to everybody that registered, but it'll also be posted to the Gold Timers website as well for access in the future. one other thing that I wanted to mention is, we have a general inbox set up. It's goldtimers@busey.com. So if there's any questions that come up or anything that we can help with after the call, or, even any recommendations for future workshops, feel free to email us at goldtimers@busey.com. That'll go directly to me, and we'll make sure we help you out the best way we can. So with that, I'll give it maybe 30, 45 more seconds, see if anybody else has any questions. And if not, we appreciate everyone joining today, and we'll talk here soon.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right. Not seeing any questions here, so appreciate it. Dave, thank you for joining today, and hope everyone has a great day and a good weekend coming up here.